At 5:07 a.m., you called over to 34 Fairview, didn't you? And Jen McCabe says, if it's in my phone records, then I must have. She didn't answer the question. She doesn't say yes or no. She says, if it's in my phone records, and she doesn't even say that she did. She says, if it's in my phone records, then I must have. So she's calling that into question. So we have not answering the question. It's very deceptive. All right, you're aware that your phone records actually show that at 5:07, you called 34 Fairview, Nicole Albert's phone, correct? And she says, correct. Okay, so what's with all the misrepresentation up here? It's because of the context of the conversation. Next question. Shows also that that call lasted 38 seconds, correct? And she says, I'm not sure what it shows. Okay, I'm not sure, again, is a deception tag for her. So she knows exactly what it shows. And we know that also because they went through this in depth at the last trial, so I'm not going to let that slide.
You actually spoke to your sister, Nicole, that morning?
I did not speak to my sister, no.
You actually spoke to your sister, Nicole, that morning, and she says, I did not speak to my sister, no. So we have the answer at the end, which is deception, and we have an uncontracted denial, which is also deception. So JM did talk to her sister. So that 38-second call went to voicemail, and she says, I'm not sure. It's a deception tag. All I can tell you is I never spoke to my sister Nicole that morning prior to waking her up.
So that 38-second call went to voicemail?
I'm not sure. All I can tell you is I never spoke to my sister Nicole that morning prior to waking her up.
How's she supposed to say that? Instead of saying I never spoke to my sister, she's supposed to say I didn't talk to my sister. So that is a lie, obviously. So I didn't versus the word no, which she say, all I can tell you is I know spoke to my sister. Obviously, that's not right. So this is an improper use of the word never. But you do acknowledge that you made a phone call at 5:07 to Nicole Albert, your sister, over at 34 Fairview. Okay, well, this is a question that he already asked, and she already answered it. And so this should be a simple answer. Let's see if it turns out to be simple. She says, yes, perfect. She's done. No need to say anything else, except she does. Now she says, I learned after when I'm first being questioned. It stays after. It was a chaotic morning. I remember the waterfall. Julie, then Tom Beatty. Nick calling to my sister wasn't as important to my ingrained in my mind at that point. No. So in my notes here, I wrote, did Jen McCabe just have a stroke?
You do acknowledge that you made a phone call at 5:07 to Julie Albert. I'm sorry, to Nicole Albert, your sister, over at 34 Fairview in those early morning hours.
Yes, I learned after. When I'm first being questioned, it's days after. It was a chaotic morning. I remembered the waterfall, Julie, then Tom Beatty. Calling to my sister wasn't as important ingrained in my mind at that point. No.
And then,
like, what happened here? So let's try and break this down. The first thing I'm going to do is break this down every time she cuts herself off. So let's look at the question again. But you do acknowledge that you made a phone call at 5:07 to Nicole Albert, a question that she already answered, and she says yes. Then she says, I learned after when I'm first being questioned. Then she cuts herself off. So we have missing time here. We have the word after. Missing time in a murder investigation with no other references is usually in regards to the murder itself. So we have missing time, and then she cuts herself off. It stays after. I don't know what it is in reference to. It stays after. That's missing time again. So this is most likely a reference to the murder, but she cuts herself off, and I don't know what it is in reference to. And then she says, it was a chaotic morning. Then she cuts herself off. I remember the waterfall. She cuts herself off. Julie, and then Julie and Tom Beatty. Nick calling to my sister wasn't as important in my, and then she says, ingrained in my mind at that point, which is another missing time statement. And then she says no. So she starts answering the question by yes, and then she says at the very end, no. I have to break this down again. So what did Jen McCabe learn when she's being questioned? All right. So let's break this down one more time. What did Jen McCabe learn when being questioned after the removed incident? So after the missing time, Jen McCabe learned that Karen Reed asked if she hit John O'Keefe after Jen McCabe, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, and Brian Higgins may have killed John O'Keefe. That's what I get from this, because she says, yes, I learned after when I'm first being questioned. So she learned, the only thing she learned at that point was that Karen Reed asked, did I hit him? Did I hit him? So this seems like it's a reference to that. The after has to be in reference to John O'Keefe's murder. So she learned that Karen Reed said that after John O'Keefe's murder. And then she says, it stays after. It stays after the murder. But I don't know what it is referencing. Then she says, I remember the waterfall. The fight at the waterfall? Is that what she's thinking about? I remember the fight at the waterfall? Because again, she's referenced the murder twice now. And there's something about the waterfall that is playing into her memory right here. But then she cuts herself off again. And she says, Julie, then Tom Beatty, Nicole. And then she says, calling to my sister wasn't as important. As what? She's saying calling Julie and calling Tom Beatty was very important. Calling Nicole wasn't as important. And that was triggered by her memory of something that happened at the waterfall. And then she cuts herself off again and says, ingrained in my mind at that point is a missing time statement. So it's probably in reference to the murder. And then ingrained in my mind seems also like a reference to the murder. So ingrained in my mind at that point, and then she says no. So the murder was ingrained, and then she just ends the statement with no. This is literally the most bizarre answer to a question I've ever seen. It is completely off topic. Her mind just explodes. There's a whole slew of information that comes out here, and it's so partial, so parsed that I can't actually even make sense of it. I can't even figure out what she's referencing here. So if anybody watching this, if there's going to be a comment thread where people are discussing, I would like it to be this. I would really like everyone who has an opinion on this to weigh in on what is she talking about, because this is very important. I don't know what happened in her brain right here, but she just did a brain dump, and this is called out of sequence information, by the way. And when you get a bunch of out of sequence information that's partial information, it's very important to figure out what all of this stuff is referencing. So let's move on.
At that grand jury, you also left out the fact that you contacted your sister, correct?
There's nothing nefarious. I remembered who I called. I didn't go back and look at phone records.
And at the grand jury, you also left out the fact that you contacted your sister, correct? I don't think Attorney Jackson even knows where to go after that. She says, there's nothing nefarious. I remembered who I called. I didn't go back and look at phone records. Her brain is still in meltdown mode here. She uses the word nefarious, which is my favorite word, by the way. I love that word. I don't know why. It just sounds cool. But she repeats, there's nothing. That's huge sensitivity, which is not surprising after the last answer. Then she says, there's nothing nefarious. Unprompted. The question was, at the grand jury, you also left out the fact that you contacted your sister, correct? Okay, there is an insinuation there, but that is no more damning of an implication than any of the 500 questions that were asked before this. The fact that she all of a sudden says, there's nothing nefarious. Then next she says, I remembered who I called. I didn't go back and look at phone records. Okay, so she says she remembered who she called. So if she remembered, she just told you that she remembered who she called, but she still left that out. And then she says, I didn't go back and look at phone records. There's nothing nefarious. This is just extra information that's not called for in the question. So Jen McCabe has to be thinking about that. She has to be thinking it's nefarious, because this question is not worded any differently than any of the 500 questions before. Okay, then she says, I remembered who I called. So if she remembered who she called, why didn't she answer the question? Now, Attorney Jackson is not going to let this go. I wouldn't either. You don't just throw out the word nefarious and then be like, oh, whatever. Okay, so he says, I didn't say it was nefarious. Why would you use the word nefarious? And she says, because there's nothing about me calling my sister that is nefarious. And I feel like you're insinuating it might be, and it's not.
I didn't say it was nefarious. Why would you use the word nefarious?
Because there's nothing about me calling my sister that is nefarious, and I feel like you're insinuating it might be, and it's not.
Okay, so the question technically is, why would you use it? And she says, it's not. I feel like you're insinuating it might be, and it's not. That is at the end. which is deceptive. It also starts with an explanatory statement. So we already know that she said the word nefarious because it's on her mind that that's nefarious. But now she lies about it. And I'm going to go through all these questions because I like the word nefarious. Did you use that word because it sounds nefarious?
Mufasa. Ooh. Do it again. Mufasa. Mufasa, Mufasa, Mufasa.
Did you use that word because it sounds nefarious?
No, I just used the word because I think that's how you're trying to portray something that is nothing.
And she says, no, I just used the word because I think that's a deception tag. She says, I just, which is a deceptive word there because she could have more easily said, no, I used the word without saying the word just because I think that's how you're trying to portray something that is nothing. So we got two indicators of sensitivity. We got just and we got because. Just is probably closer to an indicator of deception here, but then we have a deception tag with I think. And so makes this whole statement deceptive anyways. Or did you use that word because you think that's how it's coming across, that it's nefarious? And Jen McCabe says, no, not at all. All right. I think this might be Attorney Jackson's favorite word too, because he just likes to keep using it. And then this, so the no, not at all. What that technically is she's answering the question 3 times. She says no, and no with no explanation, because no, not at all is not an explanation. So no without an explanation is deception. Then she says no, which again, no without an explanation is deceptive. Then she says not at all. Not at all is essentially no with no explanation. So what has she done here? She has said no with no explanation 3 times. Next question. You do acknowledge that your phone records show that you called at 5:07 a.m. to your sister's cell phone, correct? And Jen McCabe says, I don't have them in front of me, but I believe that is correct. Yeah. So we have yeah at the end is an indicator of deception. I believe is a deception tag. And then she's referencing not having the exact stuff in front of her, which means she's saying that my memory is no good. We have 3 hard indicators of deception here. So she is not willing to acknowledge that the phone records show that she called at 5:07. Essentially, she's trying to call into question hard evidence here. So that shows extreme sensitivity on what she is about to be asked questions about. So when you see that level of sensitivity, basically she's like, I know what you're getting at, and you're about to get a big fat lie. You're about to get a BFL right here. Were you calling your sister's phone to alert her of something? Is that why you called? And she says, no. Again, that's a deception tag. So that is our big fat lie right here. Later that morning on January 29th, after those initial phone calls and after the scene had been cleared at about 11:30 in the morning, did you have a formal interview with Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor? Did you not? And she says, I did. Yes. All right. We know she had this interview. Again, you're seeing this continuously. This has become a baseline. So I talked about baselining for truth before, but there's a standard way that each person is deceptive. They have their group of favored indicators. If you look at this like there's a Venn diagram, and within this large circle, you have all of the potential indicators of deception. Then you have a smaller circle, which is Jen McCabe, who prefers to use this certain group of indicators. That's the way I'm using sort of her baseline of how she lies. For her, it's overemphasizing specificity or being overly general. And she has a little repertoire of indicators that means that her memory is faulty. I don't know, a bunch of indicators like that. All right, when she's about to lead into something big, and this in big part has to do with the way that Attorney Jackson asks questions, because he asks her the setup question right before the big question. And that setup question, like this, is, did you have a formal interview with Michael Proctor? Jen McCabe knows exactly what he's about to go into right here. She's already gone through all of these questions with him before in the previous trial. Nothing here is new. She's already been prepped at length about each one of these individual question types that she's going to have to answer. And so what this shows you is that she has rehearsed statements for each of these BFLs. And so you see that when you get deception in a known truthful response. I wanted to point out that the deception has not left her mind. She is actively thinking about the rehearsed lie as soon as he mentions the interview with Michael Proctor. So let's continue. And you told Michael Proctor in the 11:30 a.m. interview that morning that on January 29th, when Karen was on the phone with you, you told her to come to your house. Isn't that true? And she says, no, I never told her to come to my house. Never as a replacement for didn't is a BFL. We talked about this earlier. She says, no, I never, which is a replacement for no, I didn't. If somebody can't say the words no, I didn't, because that is an absolute 100% misrepresentation of reality, you're going to oftentimes see didn't replaced with never, because it's close, but it is not the same word. So no, I never is an absolute lie. She told you she wanted to go search for John, and instead of saying, I'll come meet you or I'll go wherever you want to go, you told her, no, 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 come to my house and pick me up and we'll go together. Correct? And she says, no, that's incorrect. That is my favorite deception tag with her. And she did it a lot in the first trial, and I think that was probably beaten out of her over the time between the first trial and the second trial, because it is clearly a deception tag, but sometimes it slips out here. All right. Do you remember exactly what you told him concerning the plan to either come to your house and go search for John? And she says, there was never a plan for Karen to come to my house. There was never is a replacement for the phrase, we didn't have a plan, or we didn't plan, or we weren't planning. There's a lot of ways that you can say that truthfully, but this is not one of them. So they obviously had a plan. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a police report that he drafted on this issue? And Jen McCabe says, well, okay, so we know this is a problem. Well, those are his words or summary. All right, she does this a lot. She's calling into question the police report. So she doesn't answer the question. She deflects it, and that's a clear indicator. It's actually two indicators of deception sandwiched into one. That's not my question. I know these are his words. He wrote it. My question is, would it refresh your recollection about what you told him to take a look at his report? I love Attorney Jackson's quippy little comebacks.
Would it refresh your recollection to look at a police report that he drafted on that issue?
Well, those are his words or summary.
That's not my question. I know these are his words. He wrote it.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, would it refresh your recollection about what you told him to take a look at his report?
I know what happened, and I know what I told him. I don't know what's written in that report.
So she says, I know what happened, and I know what I told him. I don't know what's written in the report. All right, so what was the question again? Every time I hear her answers, I have to go back and try and figure out what the question was again. So that's not my question. I know these are his words. He wrote it. My question is, would it refresh your recollection about what you told him to take a look at the report? All right, so this is a question. And she says, I know what happened, and I know what I told him. I don't know what's written in the report. All right, so there's numerous things going on here. She, number one, doesn't answer the question, which is evasion, which is deception. 100%, that is a hard deception tag. Not really a deception tag. I use deception tag as something that's individual for somebody. No matter who you are, if you evade the question, that's 100% deception. That's a lie. The next thing is, now she's calling into question what's in his report. So whenever you take evidence and you start calling that into question without any evidence of your own, without any explanation, you're just making wild accusations, that is an indicator of deception. And so we have two indicators of deception right here, which tells you that no matter what is written in the report, she's not going to change her answer. Then Attorney Jackson says, yes or no. Okay, yes or no is about the clearest yes or no question I think you can ask, because there's nothing else to it. And she says, I don't need to see the report. No. So she still can't answer yes or no. Again, this is deception. Why? Because she knows that regardless of what the truth is, no matter what evidence there is, no matter which police officer, no matter what electronic evidence, no matter what, she's not going to change her story. And that deceptive mentality weighs very heavily on her. Now, what I'm asking is, what did you tell Michael Proctor on January 29th? And Jen McCabe says, now, I want you to keep this in mind. I'm mentioning this now because I've already gone through all of this. And you're about to get beaten to death with this fact. The reason why I'm going to go through all of this is because of how important it is. In the interview with Karen Reed outside of this before the trial, Karen Reed tells you this is the most important piece of this case.
So the taillight pieces, when they were found and when your car was taken, to you that is the most crucial element of your defense.
It's closely followed by other evidence, but to me, yes.
And because she says that, we're going to go through all of these questions. Now, the very first time that she answers the question about the broken taillight, she is actually pulling from memory here. Listen to this.
Well, that's what you're testifying to now. What I'm asking is, what did you tell Michael Proctor on January 29th, when the express de llevar?
That she had told me she had a cracked taillight when she called me.
Okay, the question. Okay, I know that's what you're testifying to now. What I'm asking is, what did you tell Michael Proctor on January 29th? And Jen McCabe says that she had told me she had a cracked taillight when she called me. Now, notice Jen McCabe is focused on when she said this. She's not thinking about any sort of rehearsed response to anything else. That means because her editing process right now is focused only on when the rest of this just comes out as the truth, that she had told me she had a cracked taillight when she called me. That's truthful. Now, notice her verbiage here that she had a cracked taillight. Okay, now let's keep going. You didn't tell him that she indicated she noticed her taillight had been damaged on the drive back to One Meadows after she got to your house? And Jen McCabe says, she mentioned it then as well, but she also told me when she was on the phone. That's why my husband yelled out that we shouldn't be driving with a cracked taillight. Okay, we get a couple of things here. First off, she answers this question truthfully. She says, she mentioned it then as well. There's nothing wrong with that statement. She says, but she also had told me when she was on the phone. That is also another direct and truthful statement. There's nothing wrong with that statement. Now, you get extra information here. And the extra information is the reason why Attorney Jackson was asking this question, because they have an audio clip that Jen McCabe's husband yelled out that they shouldn't be driving with a cracked taillight, which is why Attorney Jackson knows that it was talked about on the phone while Jen McCabe was in the car with her husband. All right. So hopefully we're all clear on that up to this point. Now, of course, that drive back to One Meadow would have been 5:30-ish or so, maybe a little later, 5:35. And back to typical Jen McCabe. She says, approximately, yeah, I'm not sure. We have a couple of things here. She does not answer the question in the beginning. She says approximately, which is calling into question the exact time. Then she says, yeah, in the middle of the question. And then she says, I'm not sure, which is a deception tag for her. The reason why we slipped back into this is because we are back to solidifying a timeline. And there is no circumstance where Jen McCabe is going to allow Attorney Jackson to solidify a timeline or pin her down to a series of events that she feels is incriminating during any timeline. So it's the series of events that's the problem, and it's the timeline that's the problem. That's going to cause deception. We've seen that very clearly up to this point. Now, remember what we talked about before is when you have a question that has a fairly direct and obvious answer and you get a bunch of deception here, there is deception in here because he's giving a time and she's saying that she's calling that into question. So that in and of itself is deceptive. But based on this and the way that Attorney Jackson asks questions and the way that Jen McCabe answers them, I'm expecting another big fat lie to come up pretty soon here. So you told him about your observations of the taillight that day. Is that right? And Jen McCabe says, I'd have to see the report, but I believe I told him about it. Yes. So we have double I's. We have to see the report. She's always lying when she says she has to see the report. But I believe is a deception tag for her. I told him about it, and answers yes at the end. What happened? Something just happened in Jen McCabe's mind. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 indicators of deception in one line. And remember, the question is your observations of the taillight. All right, the question before this gave me the impression, just simply because the question itself wasn't aggressive enough to warrant that level of deception, that there was deception coming up. Something was triggered in her mind, a rehearsed statement that she may have forgotten, and now you're seeing a whole bunch of indicators around the taillight. So let's see what happens here. He asked you to describe specifically what the taillight looked like, and you did so, correct? That is a very easy and basic question. In fact, she's already answered it. She said that it was cracked. Now, Jen McCabe.
And you did so, correct?
Could I see the report?
All I'm asking right now.
McCabe says, if could I see the report? So if is an indicator of sensitivity. I is an indicator of deception. Could I see the report is another indicator of deception. You literally have 3 indicators of deception in here, with the only words in here that are not indicators of deception are could I. You can see this snowball coming now. There is a BFL coming up sometime in the very near future here, a rehearsed lie. I'm asking about your memory, Miss McCabe. Did you tell him about what the taillight looked like? Now, this is not a complicated question. She has already answered this question. She just didn't realize she was answering it because she was thinking about when she talked to Karen Reed when she answered this question the first time. All right, Jen McCabe says, if he asked me what the taillight looked like, then I would have told him what it looked like. Yes. Snowball's getting bigger. It's getting bigger. Okay. So if he'd asked me, which obviously he did because she already answered it, then I would have told him. Again, this is not this. She's talking about all of this in the hypothetical. And then she answers the question at the end, which is deception. So we're snowballing. What are we going to get to here? What you told Trooper Proctor on that day is that you, quote, saw a crack in it. Is that right? Okay. Now, before we read the answer, obviously that's right. That's what she already said when she was being truthful. So Jen McCabe says, I believe, deception tag, I said it was broken and cracked and it was missing pieces. Oh, bam. Here's our big fat lie. This is her rehearsed big fat lie. This is the piece that she hasn't ever said before, was missing pieces. It was cracked and was missing pieces.
And what you told Trooper Proctor on that day is that you, quote, saw a crack in it. Is that right?
I believe I said it was broken and cracked and it was missing pieces.
Now, this seems like such a small detail, right? You're like, what's the difference? Cracked, missing pieces. So why was this snowballing for so long? Why was her stress amping up for so long and so big just to add in the word missing pieces? Like, what does it matter? It was cracked. It was missing pieces. Well, if it's something small and it doesn't seem like it matters to the case, but it's this big of a deal to the witness, then it relates directly to the murder. And in this particular instance, Karen Reed told you that the cracked taillight, the missing pieces part of the cracked taillight, is what this entire case revolves around. This is what is going to exonerate her. So for Jen McCabe to be this stressed out about adding in the phrase missing pieces, that fits right in, actually, with what Karen Reed said. That fits exactly what she said. So let's continue, because if this is that big of a deal, this is going to continue to be a big deal. And if I know Attorney Jackson, he's not going to let this go. So isn't it true that what you actually said is, we got out at John's house and looked at the taillight, back right taillight, saw a crack in it, correct? And Jen McCabe says, I said that I saw it. It was cracked and it was missing pieces.
Isn't it true that what you actually said is, we got out at John's house and looked at the taillight, back right taillight, saw a crack in it, correct?
I said that I saw it and it was cracked and it was missing pieces.
This is a yes or no question. Isn't it true that you actually said? And she says, I said that I saw it. So she doesn't answer the question. 100% deceptive, which also means that the implication here is correct. But we already know that because Jen McCabe already told you. The very first time she answered the question, she told you this. And then because this statement is a hard lie, and because the verbiage is very similar to the above statement, it's rehearsed. So I was expecting a rehearsed statement. You see cracked and missing pieces. Then you see her say cracked and missing pieces. Again, let's go on to the next question. Do you remember exactly the words you used in describing that taillight to Trooper Proctor as you sit here today? And she says, again, that is a reference to a previous lie. Another huge indicator of deception. She says,
do you remember exactly the words you used in describing that taillight to Trooper Proctor as you sit here today?
Again, the taillight was cracked and missing pieces.
Okay, I know that's...
The taillight was cracked and missing pieces. Perfect reiteration of her rehearsed statement. What I'm asking you is, what did you tell Trooper Proctor on January 29th? That's my question. Do you remember the exact words you used to him on January 29th? And she says, I believe.
What I'm asking you is, what did you tell Trooper Proctor on January 29th? That's my question. Do you remember the exact words you used to him on the 29th?
I believe I said it was cracked and missing pieces.
Do you know?
It's a deception tag for her. So she is just scrolling through her list of deception tags. Let's see. I used this one. What's the next one? Yep. Let's use that one. What's the next one? It's painful to watch here, but she says, I believe I said it was cracked and missing pieces. Exactly the same statement. She rehearsed that statement over and over again. Do you know or are you guessing? Okay, well, there's two answers to this question. It's not a yes or no. It's do you know or are you guessing? So
That or are you guessing?
I'm not guessing.
Okay.
the answers are either I know or I'm guessing. And she says, I'm not guessing. This is funny. I have to laugh when I see stuff like this. Like people's creativity in being deceptive never ceases to amaze me. This is like a comedy skit for me, just seeing how people come up with ways to lie. So let's see. Lying without indicators is impossible. So when Jen McCabe gets backed all the way into a corner, she still figures out a way to use indicators of deception. Technically, Jen McCabe didn't answer the question. It seems like it, but this is where we have to get pedantic here. Do you know or are you guessing? Okay, so we talked about how the only way that she can answer it. Anything else is going to require insinuation. So Jen McCabe has to insinuate due to not answering the question. The truth is the opposite of the insinuation. Let's cover that a little bit more in depth here. When she says, I'm not guessing, she's insinuating that she knows, but she can't say that she knows because that would be 100% misrepresentation of reality. And she's not going to say that she is guessing because that would be admitting to what she doesn't want to admit to here. And so she says the only way that she can say this is I'm not guessing. So that requires an insinuation. To say it without the insinuation, you'd have to say, I know this. She doesn't say that. That makes this whole thing 100% deceptive. So a straight out misrepresentation of reality. Okay, do you remember that specifically? I mean, Attorney Jackson knows exactly what I just told you. And so he has to ask the question again. Okay, do you remember that specifically?
Do you remember that specifically?
I remember describing it as cracked and missing pieces.
Do you remember?
She says, I remember describing it as cracked and missing pieces. So he didn't ask her how she described it. He asked her, do you remember that? Because she didn't answer the previous question. So do you remember that is a yes or no question. And she gives her answer, which is not yes or no. So by not answering the question, it's deceptive. Now, she also says, I remember, which is a deception tag for her. Then she continues on to give her rehearsed statement which is, her rehearsed statement is not missing pieces. Her rehearsed statement is, it's cracked and missing pieces. That's actually the phrase. And she can't separate those two. She can't even tell you here, I remember describing it as having missing pieces. She doesn't rephrase that at all. A truthful person who hasn't rehearsed this is going to rephrase this over and over again in different ways to help you understand it. In case the way that they described it the first time was too complicated or for some reason doesn't jive in your mind, then they're going to continue to rephrase it. And she doesn't. She continues to say it exactly the same every time. Next question. Do you remember saying it had a crack or she saw a crack in it? So this was part of that rehearsed statement. So at this point, Attorney Jackson didn't ask her, does it have a crack in it and does it not have missing pieces? He's breaking the question down and doing it one at a time. Do you remember saying it had a crack in it or that she saw a crack in it?
Saying it had a crack or she saw a crack in it.
I do not remember saying that, no.
Now, this is back to the very first question. She already answered this and said, and that was the very first explanation that she gave. Now she says, I do not remember saying that. No. So if you had any question that these indicators are accurate, you get a whole bunch of them right here. I do not remember has a couple of problems with it. Number one, the answer is at the end, so it's deceptive. And she uncontracts that denial. Instead of saying, I don't remember, she says, I do not remember. So that's deception. We got two deception indicators in here, but we don't even need deception indicators because we already heard her answer this question truthfully the first time. Miss McCabe, we can do this all day. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a copy of the notes? If it wouldn't, just tell us. Now, what he just set her up here because to look at a copy of the notes can't not refresh your memory. And what he's saying is if you intend to lie about it, tell us right now that refreshing your memory with the notes won't refresh your memory. He's slick. I mean, Jen McCabe is not the sharpest tool in the shed, and if he asks questions just a little bit up here, it's gonna go way over here. So what is her answer? Let me read the question again. Would it refresh your recollection to look at a copy of his notes? If it wouldn't, just tell us. And she says, no, it wouldn't. Wow. I don't know. What else can I say? Wow. It wouldn't refresh my memory to look at the notes. I mean, she's not even trying anymore. That's just a lie, because there's no way. She just says, no, it wouldn't, which is, she's just given up on reality. So she gives up. She basically says, no matter what, I'm just going to lie. And so Attorney Jackson asks, are you telling this jury that you deny saying to Trooper Proctor you saw a crack in it? Are you denying that statement? She's worked herself through 15 lies at this point. All she has to do now is stamp it and say, yes, that's what I'm telling you. I don't care how incredibly deceptive I sound. At this point, I am just going to stick to my guns and give you the same lie every time. And
Telling this jury that you deny saying to Trooper Proctor you saw a crack in it. Are you denying that statement?
I'm not denying it.
So you could have told him that.
He asked me multiple times different questions. I spoke to him at my house, and then he had called me. So maybe one time I said it had a crack in it, and another time I said it was broken and missing pieces.
So it's very possible that that's how you described it on the 29th, Miss McCabe. It had a crack in it, right?
And missing pieces.
I'm not asking you to finish my sentence. I'm asking you, is it possible that's what people in that did? It had a crack in it. Yes or no?
Yes, that was one way.
In the days
so she says, I'm not denying it. She confessed. I'm not denying it is a confession that everything that she said up to this point is a lie. Now, the only question is, does the jury understand what they're hearing at this point? And then Attorney Jackson says, so you could have told them that. He has to get her to say it twice because she keeps changing her answers on everything. And she says, now keep in mind, that's a yes or no question. So you could have told him that. After she just says, I'm not denying it. And she says, he asked me multiple times different questions. I spoke to him at my house, and then he had called me. So maybe one time I said it had a crack in it. And another time I said it was broken and missing pieces. Okay, now she's just making us do a whole bunch of extra work here. First off, she doesn't answer the question. This is a yes or no question that she doesn't answer. So this whole thing is going to be a lie. Now, the words in the beginning are stalling into a lie, typical. Bunch of extra words that don't mean anything. And then we get to maybe, which is a reduction of commitment that leads right into the lie. Then we have, she repeats crack in it. Why? Because that's what she saw. And so that is sensitive. And so repeating it twice is an indicator of sensitivity. That's why it's an indicator of sensitivity. Then Jen McCabe ends with the lie, which is the rehearsed statement, which is it's broken and missing pieces. So it's very possible that that's how you described it on January 29th, Miss McCabe. It had a crack in it, right? Well, yes, it's possible because she just described it 5 minutes ago in this line of questioning as just having a crack in it. And then she says, and missing pieces. Dear God, I hope the jury is not so dumb as to look past this. This is the first time that she doesn't say with a crack in it, but notice that he just said that. So she just completed the sentence in her mind. So he says, Miss McCabe, it had a crack in it. And she says, and missing pieces, because that's how she memorized the statement. Oh man, what does Attorney Jackson say next? He says, I'm not asking you to finish my sentences. I'm asking you if you said that there's a crack in it. And she says, yes, that is one way. So technically what she has done here, she says yes, which is the truth, but then she has to add in her way of undermining that is the only truth. So she's still being deceptive, trying to imply that there was also the missing pieces. She says, yes, that's one way, because earlier she said that's one way, and then there's another way. So she's referencing a previous lie, which is in and of itself another indicator of deception. In the days following January 29th and the events of January 29th, 2022, were you and your family coordinating your versions of the events that occurred on that morning? And she says no, which is a deception tag, no without a exclamation on it. So we've moved on here to now, is she coordinating with this group chat? Attorney Jackson says, were you and your family coordinating some sort of damage control in terms of the language that your family would use to the public, to the press, to law enforcement? And Jen McCabe says no. It's the same deception tag that she had before. We're getting a clear picture on what's going on here. And the last question here is, did you and part of your family use a group chat to text each other to coordinate your communications with either the press or the public or law enforcement or family or friends? Now, this is how Attorney Jackson works. He starts out leading you into a trap, letting you know that he's leading you into a trap, which works beautifully with Jen McCabe because it ramps up her indicators and shows the entire world that she's being deceptive. And in here, she doesn't answer the question. She says, I have a group. I have multiple like group chats with family and friends. So the question again is, did you and part of your family use a group chat to text each other to coordinate your communications? And she says, I have group chats with my friends. So she's deceptive. Every aspect of her testimony here was deceptive. I find this just shockingly annoying to go through her testimony because there's nothing subtle about it. There's nothing truthful about it, unless she accidentally tells the truth. Like that, there's like one little blurb in here where she tells the truth. Other than that, it's complete deception. So what I want to know is, well, first off, I want to know what you guys think that little stroke that she had. What does all that stuff mean? I know you guys follow the evidence and, put the storyline together much better than I do. I just go through each person's statement one by one. So if you can make sense out of those statements, please figure that out for me. We are through day 7, which is day 1 of the testimony for Jen McCabe. After this, I'm going to put out one more video that is going to cover her second day of testimony. So, boy, I can't wait to see what that looks like. Looking at her statements is draining. But I will say, if you go through her statements, there is no question what the truth is. As hard, as boring as it is to go through Jen McCabe's statements, you get a crystal clear idea of what the actual truth is. So from that perspective, it's very nice to go through these statements because you can very clearly get these facts worked out. It can really help you put the timeline together. So that being said, Crafty Thinking and I are going to do another collaboration video where we're going to go through and talk in real time. We're going to go through your guys' questions. She's going to have some questions for me, and we're going to talk about this part of Jen McCabe's testimony. Is there a lot to scrutinize as far as, is Jen McCabe being deceptive? I don't know. Maybe. At this point, it's more about trying to put together the timeline. What facts do we actually know at this point? So please, give me your comments. See if you can start to put together the timeline based on what you now know is the truth, based on what you've seen in this video. All right. That being said, I will see you in part 3. Thanks for watching.